was lost without you.
Ready? Is this a new report?
Yes. It was passed out at the city council in Victoria.
Oh, was it?
These are,
You guys are setting a high bar for yourself.
Yes. It is really outstanding. This is an outstanding document.
Updates, we got another communications staff person coming in. Be able to take more.
wow. Okay, I'll call the meeting to order of September 28th, 2023. If there's anybody who'd like to address the group, seeing none, I'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move approval.
Manager Miller, second. Manager Hicks-Matty. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. There are no information and correspondence items. Next, we'll have a motion on the consent agenda where we will approve the minutes of the September 14th meeting, approval of the check registers, and approval of consent items, resolution 23-059, authorization to release requests for proposals for government relations services, and resolution 23-053, approval of cross easement for Cottageville Park Phase 2. Is there a motion to approve?
I would like to get a report on 7.2.
On 7.2?
Mike, just keep turning on it. Let's vote for the remaining portion of it.
Okay. We will pull 7.2 out, and Mike can address that. All those in favor of the
Aye.
remaining items? Oh,
Move approval.
Manager Miller made a motion. Manager Hicks-Matty seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. All right.
Would you like that hour?
Let's do 7.2 now. We would have to have another motion for 7.2. Also, thank you.
Oh, to move it, not to have it on not to take it up, do we?
Correct.
Good evening, Chair Olson, managers. So 7.2 is related to the cross easement for Cottageville Park Phase 2. So as you recall, the board approved the operations and maintenance agreement in May. And as part of that, we have an original easement for the Cottageville Park proper. So the main park that we own all the underlying property to, there's a one-way easement to the city of Hopkins to be able to access and maintain it for mowing and vegetation purposes. For the Phase 2 project, we own the gateway parcel, but then over at the Nature Play parcel, that's actually 3 smaller parcels, 2 home sites that we had purchased, and then a piece of city property on the creek. So the cross easement is actually each entity or each agency giving it access to each other's property for long-term maintenance. The ownership and all amenities associated with the construction of that project were already covered under the previous agreements. This is simply just to allow the city staff access to mow, maintain vegetation, and vice versa for the city to access, or for the district to access city property for repairing, restoration, and other needs for the park.
Thank you.
Yep.
Move approval.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Manager Sando, second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion carries. Board Committee Task Force reports. President White is not here tonight. I'd like to have a report from the Policy and Planning Committee with Manager Miller.
We had a very comprehensive presentation of the Water Partnership Initiative, which coordinates the land and water resources for opportunities for future programs with private developers in the city. It's been the representative of the city through our technical advisory committee has been involved in developing and analyzing the proposed program, and it year for approval.
Thank you. Next, we have the Citizen Advisory Committee report from Manager Sando.
Yes, good evening, everybody. On 9/20, we had an excellent CDC meeting, and 10 of the CDC members were in attendance. Kate, Becky, and Samantha were also in attendance from our staff. As always, Kate gave just an excellent overview on our diversity, equality, and inclusion program. Good feedback from CAC, a lot of good questions. We'll receive an update from the staff in October on that program, on the diversity, equality, and inclusion program. Well attended and very, very stimulating.
Thank you. All right, next we have our schedule on the agenda. Coming up, we've got a Minnesota Watersheds Metro Group meeting at Manager Maxwell. Will be the liaison, and we will move on to public hearings, which we have none. Permits and requiring a variance discussion will have none. And we move on to action items. Item 11.1, resolution of 23060, authorization to contract with Navats for software implementation services for permitting rule revisions. Mr. Steele.
Good evening, Chair Olson, managers. Tonight I am presenting on a scope of work for software implementation services from Novatics to update our permitting platform, Elements XS, to align with the upcoming rule revisions. So before I get to the meat of what is before you tonight, I want to provide some brief background on the goals and outcomes of our stakeholder engagement process for our Land and Water Partnership Initiative. I think that'll serve as useful context for understanding where we've been, how we've brought our partners along, and where we are going, how we are operationalizing and executing on the outcomes stemming from that process, more specifically on the permitting rule revisions and aligning our technology to those changes, those revisions. And then I want to zoom out and provide a 10,000-foot view of our explaining how our permitting technology solution, what we call our permitting portal, how it works, and really that'll help serve as a grounding for seeing how the technology will need to change to align to the rule revisions through the contract that is before you tonight. And then I'll present on the scope of work, walk through the implementation for those software changes to our permitting portal, and wrap up, of course, with cost schedule. So you were briefed on this in PPC earlier tonight, but really stemming from our Land and Water Partnership Initiative, which centered on strengthening partnerships that support MCWD's focus on building impactful collaborative projects. And the technical advisory process, the TAC, which stemmed from that process and was convened through a number of meetings through June of this year. Back in June, Becky provided kind of an overview of that process, but really the TAC provided input on three key topic areas. There's the coordination improvements, the Land and Water Partnership Program, which Kate covered earlier this evening in PPC, and then permitting program improvements, which Abby provided an overview to the PPC in regards to the rule revisions last month. So I am before you tonight as a continuation of our those permitting program improvements and really serving as one of the pieces for how the district executes and delivers on the goals of our rule revisions, specifically how we leverage and utilize technology to support those goals of aligning our rules to state MS4 standards, and also getting at the goal of simplifying and streamlining our permitting processes to improve customer service. So in terms of technology in our permitting program, way back in January of 2020, the board approved the selection of Elements XS from Novatics to serve as our technology platform for permitting. Following implementation, the system went live in April of 2021 and has since served to transform how the district receives, reviews, and issues permits. So we built the system around the district's existing rules, and since some of those rules are set to be revised, I want to walk through how the system works currently, because I think that'll set a good framework and provide the context needed for some of these implementation services and how we need to adjust it to align with our new rules. So really at the highest level, there are two sides of our permitting software platform. There's the applicant side, which we refer to as the permitting portal, and then there's the staff side, where all the material review, the documentation occurs by our permitting team in their effort to process and issue permits. So how it works. A permit applicant accesses our permitting portal through a web browser, so it's all online now. So you can find it from our website, and on our new website there are multiple pathways to get to it. On the home page, obviously on the permitting page, but also through the partnership page. So that's where someone who wants to apply for a district permit, they go, they create an account, or they sign in if they're a returning customer, and they begin the application process. So how it works, there are kind of two general steps that an applicant goes through when they're submitting a permit application to the district. First, there's an initial information gathering process that screens for applicable rules based on data and information that's provided by the applicant. And then there is a rule-specific information gathering step in which the system then collects information regarding those specific rules that are triggered. And that's really shaped then by that first initial screening step. So I'll walk through each of these at a high level. So at first, we're just collecting general information. We're asking the applicant, they input who they are they a private owner? Are they, a city staff? Are they representative of a private owner? We collect information on the project type, single-family home, a subdivision, maybe it's shoreline stabilization. And then we're collecting spatial information. So the applicant enters their address or a parcel identification number, or they're drawing a polygon on a map if it's work that occurs outside of parcel boundaries, like in the right-of-way for road or utility work. Following that, the system collects project-specific information, so project narrative, features that will be disturbed or impacted as part of this project, whether that's a floodplain, wetlands, shoreline. We collect information on the disturbance area and the excavation volume proposed through the permit application. We're collecting existing and proposed impervious, anticipated start and end dates, permits applied for from other agencies, collecting a lot of information through that process. So really based on those buckets that we're collecting, the system then can helps to determine which rules are applicable for all the given work. And this is really done via programming logic. If certain thresholds are met or certain conditions are met, then a rule is applicable to the permit. So it's simple if-then statements. And I think a simple example, based on our current rules, if disturbance area is greater than 5,000 square feet, then the erosion control is applicable. So really based on that the spatial and the project specific information that's supplied by the applicant, the system determines which rules are applicable. And then for each triggered rule, we're prompted to collect additional information for each triggered rule. So we collect that information, it becomes part of the permit record and is checked and verified by our permitting staff on the back end as part of their review process. So each rule has its own submittal requirements as well. So the system provides a filtered list of what those submittal requirements are based on the triggered rules. So site plans, specific things on site plans. The applicant gets a good list of all those things that are required and then has a place to upload the documents right into the portal. And then it's really agreeing and signing, which is an application submission. There's language that the applicant agrees to by submitting a permit, including, if they're applying on behalf of a private landowner, that they have authority to do so, that work can't proceed until a permit is issued. Pretty standard language there. And then it is signed, dated, and submitted. That creates the digital permit record that then moves into the staff side, where they do their review process. And then at the end of that process, if all the checklists are met and all the requirements are met by the applicant, the permit is then issued. So it's kind of a lot, but I think just at a high level, that's how our technology system really serves as a horsepower for kind of modernizing and digitizing our permit application process.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So the information is fed in for the application. And where's the interface with the staff? So it's entered
Yep.
and received, and how is it, what's the interface with the person?
Like the communication between
Yeah.
staff. So through the portal, this technology solution, there is discussion items, so it's almost like mini emails that go back and forth that are also logged against the permit record itself. So there's tracking of, if something is incomplete or, specific details are needed within some submittal requirements,
But
that can be documented and it can go back and
It's
forth.
like sent to the permitting department,
Mhm.
and then somebody in the permitting department is assigning each.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, then there's an assignment process that they run through internally for.
But the manual stuff we have traditionally been doing, where we look at the rules and we look at what they
Yeah.
need to do, it's all automated now. And then those things they triggers more questions for them as they fill out their application. So all the rules that are applicable will now be triggered, and the computer will work with the client. And then at the end, when he's ready to sign, we review everything.
Our version of AI then. If they're
Not-
making those decisions, you need more information. I'm wondering how, I hate applying for something on the computer, so I got a prejudice, but, so how does the applicant know, that he's got to give more information, or he doesn't qualify the way it's submitted, or what? Is there a phone conversation then at all?
Yeah.
Mr. Miller, I could speak to that. I'm a printing technician with the Washington State before, but often when we get these applications in, we take the time to review them. And in cases where it's more of a complex project, or we can tell that someone really doesn't understand everything they need to submit, that's when we reach out to them to set up an informal pre-application meeting so we can walk them through the
Good.
process.
Thank you. Sounds reasonable.
Yeah, and the system is set up, so if there's any changes or new communications too within the system itself between staff and the applicant, they will get an email too as well. So there's kind of multiple levels that we go through for maintaining the communication. Yeah, but our rules, so that's the system as it currently works with our current rules, but the rules are being updated, they're being revised, and our permitting platform needs to be updated, which really leads us to this scope of work before you tonight. So we've worked with Novotics to scope out the changes needed to implement and operationalize the rule revisions. And in general, the work falls into 3 buckets. There's new rule trigger logic. Those revisions, they have changes to the rule trigger thresholds, which is in part driven by the need to align to state MS4 requirements. Those rule triggers are those conditions or thresholds, if met or exceeded, that the rule becomes applicable. So we've translated that into kind of simple logic that then Novotics will take and build into the software through programming logic. There's a bucket of just general changes, which are a smaller part of the scope. Novotics will be implementing some of those with some new data fields that we want to collect information on, updating language to be aligned with our new rules, as well as making sure the staff side, everything is aligned in how we are reviewing any of those updated submittal requirements. And then the largest changes to our permitting process is the general permit. And that's really the bulk of work for this scope before you tonight. The general permit is really designed to streamline the permit issuance process for permits that have a low risk to natural resources, which is getting at that goal of streamlining our processes, making them efficient, and improving customer service. It's a whole new concept for the district, so it's a whole new process that we need to build out a new software workflow to support for issuing a permit automatically if all those conditions and thresholds are met. So this is how it will work, kind of in the same flow diagram that you saw earlier. The applicant will still go through that initial information gathering and screening process in our permitting portal, and if those conditions and thresholds and that logic, they're all sound and a general permit is applicable, the applicant will then upload some of the base documentation, site plan, agree to conditions of a general permit, and then submit the application. All the data, the digital permit record is still created, comes over to the staff side for our tracking and record keeping, but then the permit itself will be issued immediately and automatically. So it's an automated workflow for the general permit.
The new rules are going to remove a lot of current requirements for permit from us, like borders around the property when they're excavating and stuff like that. Well, there's going to be, that'll be automatic permit then? You know, it's just some simple thing that,
Like the process?
yeah.
Yeah, if it fits within the
But
erosion.
I'm thinking the range from a single-family home to some massive, you know, West End kind of project. Are they gonna be able to apply on this portal for something that complicated?
Manager Miller, I can speak to that again. So the general permit is only going to be applicable if your project only triggers erosion control and it's between 5,000 square feet and 1 acre. If you trigger any other rules, you're adding hard cover, you're
Okay.
impacting a
All
stream
right.
or wetland,
Okay.
you don't get your permit, right?
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, within the thresholds and conditions, those are all those things that need to be met. You know, as Abby described, and no other, like, there's very set circumstances or conditions in which the system, this technology can help us filter that down and see when it
Okay.
actually is
So
applicable.
the simple permits
Yep.
will use this new system.
Yep.
And the more complicated ones will use
Yep,
some
still go
modification.
through,
Okay.
yep, our
All
standard
right,
permitting
great. Thank
process,
you.
yep.
If this runs correctly, they will never see our front door, will they? They
Yeah.
don't have,
I mean, for the most part, I mean, there's still the compliance framework and how we're going to inspect some of these going forward. And we'll have, you know, obviously site plans that come in as part of these, so there's still a record.
I still
and we
reckon
can-
with the digital site plans coming in, they don't have to drive up with a lot of paper.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Steele, does our staff go out and walk the area that's being permitted?
Yep.
Maybe more than one staff, right?
Yeah, our permitting team, I can't speak to a ton of specifics, but I know they do have inspections, and there's been work towards the compliance framework and how we are, you know, evaluating the risk to natural resources based on a permit and all the information we're collecting and how often we are inspecting as it moves through the process. And even with the general permit, there's still requirements of when we're going to inspect those, just to make sure they're within compliance throughout the life of the project and then following kind of close out.
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
Directed to you probably is, have you, some of this has already been implemented, and so has that improved the way you work? Has it been more efficient? Do you like it? Tell me a little bit about your experience.
Yeah, Manager Hezmati, I have really enjoyed the implementation of the permitting portal. I have found that it makes it a lot more efficient for my review. Everything's done on the computer these days.
Yes,
so
it is.
It's nice to be able to, pull up the application right away, and I can, pull up my map side by side on the computer and see, what are the natural resources on this parcel. And then another big benefit is with our old database, there's a lot of data in there, but if you wanted to find out, what's the average permits we're receiving annually, or how many permits of this type or that type do we get, you would do that all manually. Where in this one, we can set up it to run reports on specific data that we're interested in, and it'll automatically have it right when we click. It'll be updated every single time we get a new permit, so it makes it really easy to understand what's coming through the front door, and we can start, planning for the future based on the metrics we have from the past.
Okay, so you're aggregating data so you can develop metrics on it, so you can plan and work with it. Okay. So you're really enjoying doing that then? Is that good, not only you, but are the other folks also finding the same thing? Is that
Yeah,
really
I
genuine?
think so. I'm excited too just about the additional things, that Alex bring forward. There's further improvements to make, and I think as we, continue down this path, we're going to find more ways to optimize it, which is exciting to see how we can make the data work for us to tell the permitting story.
Okay, good. How do the people who are using the system, do you get any feedback from them as to its useful, whether they like it or don't like it, or any feedback of that kind? Or do we even collect that data?
I think it's somewhat based on conversation that permitting has with applicants.
Okay.
It's probably the biggest funnel. There has been talk about, including a survey as part of kind of the permitting process. How was the system, the service, all those things that, we've considered before. With any technology solution, change management is always the most difficult part. And I think when it first came first went live back in 2021, I think it's a lot new stuff to get used to, but I think as it's stabilized and it's become more familiar to folks, especially those who are frequent flyers who come for a lot of permits, I think they get used to the process, used to the system, and then it's pretty streamlined. But
Yeah, I'll just echo what Alex said. We get a mix of comments, but overall it seems like people really are getting used to the new system. And one of the benefits I think I found and applicants have commented on is just, they're able to check on their permit status automatically. So before we would receive a lot of phone calls and emails saying, what's the status? And now they can log on right away and say okay, look, it's being it's being reviewed by the staff or engineer, and here's the deadline for when I'm going to hear back on that. So that cuts down on, inefficiencies there.
Yes, yeah. So it's easier for them, you're saying it's efficient for them to be able to figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I think maybe there's a little bit of a learning curve at the start, but once you get into it and you have your portal and your dashboard, and you've gone through it once, you kind of understand the process.
Okay. Chris, what's your experience as the engineer with this?
Manager Hajmati, it's actually quite easy for us because usually they're able to have a concise understanding of what their pathway forward is versus we would even get calls prior to the system being implemented. They would just call us at Stantec and ask us. This allows a funneling of kind of information. It creates predictability, which for permit holders is really, really important. So
Okay.
just understand, when am I going to get across the gate? When am I going to go forward? So it's streamlined a lot of it, and with the database and the system in place now, for us reviewing and getting the information from staff is much more segregated and easy to understand, so that when we do our reviews, it's a much more streamlined process.
Okay. So it's been efficient for you too?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. sounds like a great program you're putting in.
It's had its hurdles, of course, but
All of them do.
Well, that's what
as,
you're
it,
here for.
as they all do.
There's always teething problems when you first start, what can you do? That's the way it is.
Yes, so total cost for Novotics to complete this scope of software implementation services to support our rule revisions is not to exceed $19,440, which is an amount we have budgeted and available in the IT budget for 2023. As Abby mentioned, we are looking at other areas of improvement within our program, our permitting program, as well as enhancements to the permitting platform, Elements XS. Those enhancements are generally around streamlining of permit review or the inspection stemming from some of our new compliance framework pieces. So those potential technology enhancements are all on the staff side of the system, and it's anticipated that we'll be able to complete those either in-house or with the short form work order. So we have a little more control on that side of the system. So in terms of schedule, for this scope is really set to occur over the next few months with implementation running through the end of the year. We will use January of 2024 for rigorous testing to ensure all those changes, all the workflows, all those thresholds and conditions, that they're all correctly developed and functioning as intended. So we are aiming for go live then to be February 1 of 2024. And then I'll show you here on how this fits within kind of the broader rule revisions timeline, which is got at the bottom here. So Abby will be back in front of you at the end of October for authorization to release the rule revisions for opening it up for a public comment period, which will occur through November before coming back to you for review of those comments and then final approval and adoption in January. So our goal is to have the technology ready to go live February 1, so right after kind of that anticipated board approval date, but really it'll be ready to go whenever the board sets as the effective date of the new rules. So with that, staff recommends approval of 23060, which is authorization to contract with Novotics for software implementation services for updating our district permitting portal for our forthcoming rule revisions. I'll be happy to take any questions.
Hold on a second. Okay, before I take questions, is there a motion to approve resolutions
So
23?
moved.
We have a motion from Manager Ismati. Do I have a second?
Second.
Manager Sando, a second. Okay. Questions?
Yeah.
Manager Ismati.
Is this, I'm presuming, I'm hearing that you look at what as you aggregate the data, you'll start wanting to make changes and so on. Will we be working with these folks on an ongoing basis to incorporate those changes into the program?
Maybe some of them.
Or can we do that in-house?
We can
What
do.
are you thinking about?
We can do a lot of this in-house, especially on the staff side, which is a little more user-friendly for adminning and
Oh,
making
is it?
changes.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Yep. So we've come a long ways in our understanding and being able to make changes and streamline things for that fit the efficiencies in our workflows and things. So
Okay.
they provide there's training services that we could tap into, or just guidance as well, as they're the software developer, and they just have that insight as well. But a lot of it's very well documented and pretty standard, and there's a good user community, so there's a lot of resources to tap into to be able to make some of those enhancements in-house.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I was going to say, as I got on, they're very good. As I got on tonight, they informed me that my